Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the DFO DFS show for Thursday, May the 6th. Hope everyone's having an enjoyable Thursday thus far. Hopefully, we can continue our hot streak here on the DFO DFS show. No 14-game slates today, no running around before things. So we do have the little bug up in the top right corner there with our implied totals and our 6 games that we have for Thursday night. Another solid night again last night. I mean, Columbus, too, actually did pretty well. We got a goal from Roslovic, a goal from Grigorenko, nothing from Bemstrom, but Brandstrom was an absolute stud, 3 apples. A lot of our other lines went off. The only line that really didn't do anything for us was Colorado 1, and they were chalky, so we were able to gain on the field with our other lines if you built multiple lineups, which I hope some of you did. Honestly, this is the best NHL DFS show I have watched. I have watched a few. Def deserve more viewers for sure. Thank you very much, Jason. Appreciate the kind words. One way to get more viewers on this show is by smashing that like button and getting us to the top of the YouTube page. Because it's fun. More people's always good. But, it doesn't really matter as long as we're winning money. That's all that I'm really here for. Honestly, this show helps me because I do all this work all day. And then this is when I finally get to sit down and study it myself. So it helps me just as much as it helps you guys. But all day I was on Brandstrom, then changed to Makar last minute FML. Yeah, that is a bizarre change. But no, Brandstrom was definitely solid last night. He looks really comfortable, in the elevated role. So hopefully that continues for them. But anyways, let's get into tonight's 6-game slate. We've got the Pittsburgh Penguins opening up the night against the Buffalo Sabres. It will be Tristan Jarry for the Penguins. Michael Hauser makes his 3rd consecutive start for the Sabres. DFS darling Michael Hauser. No longer 6,500, though. He is 7,000 tonight. So a little bit more expensive for Hauser. The Hurricanes will go back to Peter Mrazek against the Blackhawks, who will go right back to Colin Delia as well. The Toronto Maple Leafs are expected to start Jack Campbell. He was in the starters crease this morning. About 5 minutes ago, the Montreal Canadiens announced that Caden Primo will get the start for them. Thomas Tatar also returns to the lineup for Montreal. The Islanders will most likely go back to Semyon Varlamov tonight. Ilya Sorokin started their most recent game. They've been rotating throughout the year. Mackenzie Blackwood confirmed to start for the New Jersey Devils. The Boston Bruins will turn to Jeremy Swayman against the Rangers, who I'm sure will be quite happy to not have to fight 7 times tonight or 11 times or however many fights there were in that game last night. Too many to count. Unconfirmed who starts for them. I do have my Twitter open here on the side so I can try to find out who starts for them if they announce it here in the next little bit. But Igor Shesterkin most likely going to start after Alexander Georgiev went for the Rangers last night. And then in the nightcap at 9 p.m. Eastern, it is most likely going to be Mikko Koskinen for the Edmonton Oilers against Thatcher Demko of the Vancouver Canucks. V, where can I find on the website the top lines for DFS show as you show on YouTube? Yeah, so you have to join DFO Premium. Those are a premium option you can join for as little as $9.99 for the week. But if you do want to join Premium, obviously helps me, but you can go right here to Optimizer and then go Premium. If you want, like I said, it's only $9.99 for 1 week. Test it out, see if you like it. If not, then you can just continue to tune into the show. But it is a nice little time to, we've basically got a week left of the season. It's a nice time to join. Figure out if you like it, and then you can subscribe again next year. And the next year, it's going to be completely revamped, all new tools, in addition to what we've got already. So let's start the show here with the, the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Buffalo Sabres. So the Penguins have the highest implied total on the entire slate tonight at 4 goals, which is extremely high. I don't normally see that. But, this is a very bizarre slate because all 6 home teams are the much better teams. They're heavily favored. They're on home ice. So it's going to be kind of a bizarre slate because you've got just 6 heavy favorites. And then all their top lines are pretty much the ones you're going to want to target. We'll get into that more, obviously. But it's going to be hard to build lineups because of how big the home favorites are. But obviously, though, that should help keep some of the chalk off of some of these, really good lines, and we should be able to find some advantages elsewhere. So, anyways, let's get into it here. Pittsburgh versus the Sabres, 4 goals implied total for the Penguins, 2.1 for the Buffalo Sabres. Pittsburgh 1 grades out by far and away the best option in this game. None of the other lines really grade out positively in the 5v5 score. Based on the matchups in this game, it's going to be Sidney Crosby up against the second line, which is the Casey Middlestad line, for about 50% of the ice time. So a hard match there for Crosby against the Middlestad line. The third line, which is Jared McCann, Jeff Carter, we'll see a little bit more of that Sam Reinhart line. And then the Penguins' second line, Evgeny Malkin, we'll see a little bit of the top line as well, but a lot of the Sabres' fourth line. Dalton, I have premium and I've tried the optimizer, but I'm not able to see the lines. And so, yeah, so if you go to the DFS score right here under optimizer, then you will be able to, there's a link down below to get access to the Google Sheets with all of the exact same Google Sheet that I'm using here. So just go to DFS 5v5 score. It's got all the 5v5 scores there, but then also there's the link to the DFS, to the Google Sheet, excuse me, and then also our Discord channel. So that's how you find that. So yeah, we'll start with the Crosby line going head-to-head with the second line of the Sabres. Crosby's line is obviously extremely good, by far the best line that the Penguins have to offer offensively. 29 scoring chances, 4 per 60, 11 high danger, almost 12. Really good usage, about 30% of their 5v5 ice time going up against the Sabres second line, which is not very good defensively. 44.2 Corsi 4 for them, so not a very good line in terms of maintaining the puck possession, giving up 11, not a ton of scoring chances. 23 is not terrible, but 11 high danger, not great, and then just getting caved in. So we saw this Crosby line struggle a little bit in the first game against the Flyers. The second game, they're absolutely dominant. You just showcases just how dominant they can be. So in this matchup, they should have no problem. The Michael Hauser story has been obviously pretty good, but it's hard to expect that to continue tonight. It could for sure, but against Sidney Crosby, you'd imagine that he should be able to have some success against this Buffalo second line. The Malkin line going head to head with the Sabres fourth line. The Sabres fourth line actually gets a little bit better tonight because Cody Eakin's out. Eakin's just terrible. So with Riley Sheahan, and I think it's Drake Caggiula, they've been okay together, not nearly as bad as Cody Eakin is. So it's still not a bad matchup by any means. They're not very good defensively either, so it should be it should be an okay matchup for Pittsburgh too. The problem with Pittsburgh too, Malkin's still probably a little bit rusty. Their overall offensive numbers aren't that great, but as I mentioned, it is going to be probably the 6 top lines from these 6 heavy favorites. Are going to be very popular tonight. So Pittsburgh too is a nice pivot to me, even though their offensive numbers aren't all that appealing. The matchup against Buffalo 4 for the majority of the night is definitely something that is piquing my interest. Zucker's only 3,300, extremely cheap. Kasperi Kapanen just 3,700, also very cheap, and then Malkin even at 6,100. So the full stack them 13,100, I think, is definitely a pretty good option tonight. It's just obviously the ownership is going to be significantly less than Pittsburgh 1. So I do like Pittsburgh 2 a little bit. Normally I'm all about the numbers. But, as bad offensively as their numbers are, the matchup against Buffalo 4, their defensive numbers are just disastrous. So it should be a fine matchup there for them. For the Penguins, or for the Sabres, the second line, the Malkin line, is really the only one that's struggling defensively. And then obviously they're going to spend most of their time on the ice against the Buffalo fourth line. So it's really, you're not going to be playing Riley Sheahan and Jake Caggiula. So it doesn't really look like a great game here for the Sabres. Obviously, they've been playing pretty good hockey down the stretch. Reinhart's played very well. But to me, I can't target them. Tristan Jarry is pretty solid in net. So it just doesn't look like a night really to target any of these underdogs. Since there's 6 heavy favorites, it seems easy to kind of find some value on those teams, and to go to a team that's probably going to get crushed like the Sabres are, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Obviously, if you want to play Reinhart, you could, but they're going to be going up head to head against the third line, which is the Jared McCann, Jeff Carter line, which has been absolutely outstanding. 54.8 Corsi 4, really good defensive numbers. So I don't think I need to talk you out of playing Buffalo. I'm sure most of you were probably not considering it anyway, and I would probably agree. Just really not a whole lot. They don't offer a whole lot offensively. The Penguins are pretty good 5v5 team defensively, so not a whole lot of interest there. Second game of the night, we got the Hurricanes and the Blackhawks. I'll go through the 5v5 stuff a little bit first, and then I'll circle back to the power play. So we'll continue here with the Hurricanes and the Blackhawks. Implied total 3.8 for the Hurricanes, 2.3 for the Blackhawks. Carolina's top line continues to be absolutely red hot. They look terrific again tonight. The problem is with these numbers is, so Dylan Strome played on the top line the other night. He's a healthy scratch tonight. Brett Connolly moves in. So Brett Connolly, obviously not a center. So we have no idea what the Blackhawks lines are going to look like. I tried to reach out to a couple of beat reporters. They have no idea. So everything we have is basically a guess, which is kind of unfortunate. So, not only does it affect the offensive numbers for the Blackhawks if our lines are wrong, but also it affects potentially their defensive numbers and how it might positively or negatively impact the Hurricanes. But overall, the Blackhawks really not that good of a defensive squad as a whole. So It shouldn't really change things too much from a Hurricanes perspective. We're going to see a lot of Sebastian Aho going head-to-head with Patrick Kane again tonight, Vincent Trocheck against the second line most of the time, and then Jordan Staal against the third line most of the time. So very easy to break down, but just keep in mind that some of these numbers for the Blackhawks are most likely not going to be 100% correct because I guarantee you that their lines are different than what I have. But overall, that Patrick Kane line, not very good defensively, no matter who he plays with. They're pretty solid offensively, but not very good defensively. So it should be another good night for Carolina 2. They continue, or Carolina 1, excuse me. They continue to play extremely well. They're red hot. I absolutely love them tonight, especially when you factor in the fact that they're getting up there in price, but they're still not crazy expensive. $6,500 for Svechnikov, Aho $7,200, Teravainen is still just way too cheap at $5,400. So in the whole on the whole slate, they're really not all that expensive when you consider it. As you see here, they are the 5th most expensive line to full stack. Behind Boston, Edmonton, Pittsburgh, Toronto, and Carolina. So, they are Carolina, but you get what I'm saying. So overall, they're not that expensive in the grand scheme of things. And then they look extremely good again tonight. The way things are shaking up, so this is where I get a little bit tripped up here, is because Carolina 2 obviously looks like they're a pretty good play against tonight. Their offensive numbers are very similar to what Carolina 1 offers, but the way that we currently have the Blackhawks lineup projected, that line, which I believe is, I don't even remember, I think it's David Kampf, Phil Kurashev, that says Dominic Cahoon. That should not say Dominic Cahoon. I don't know what that's all about. But it's Kurashev, Hagel, and Dominic Kubalik. They've been pretty good defensively thus far. So, if that ends up being the matchup, it's maybe not as good as you might think for Carolina 2. So I would wait to see. I mean, it's hard for me to really, I can't explain every line's numbers to you, but I think I would go into this game, just planning on playing the majority of Carolina 1. Carolina 2 seems like a decent pivot option, but keep in mind that they might not have the greatest matchup against Chicago 2. And then obviously Carolina 3, just doesn't offer the same upside when Niederreiter's on the second line. Their matchup's okay, but overall probably not going to chase that. On the flip side, not really a whole lot to like from the Blackhawks perspective. I mean, they've obviously scored a decent amount of goals this year, but the Hurricanes very solid defensively. I mean, every single line over 54% Corsi for. So it's really difficult to be, to buy into the Blackhawks. Obviously, they scored a couple goals the other night, but it was DeBrincat, I think, had 2 breakaways for the most part, or 1 breakaway and then just one snipe. It's hard to envision that happening again. I mean, Mrazek was a little bit rusty. I think that the Hurricanes, and Vegas agrees, are probably going to win this game pretty handily. And just, the uncertainty surrounding the Blackhawks lines, I can't be like, hey, play these guys with this guy, because at the end of the day, once warm-up starts, they might not even be together. So the uncertainty with their lines and just a tough matchup makes me off the Blackhawks night. All right, the second game here, or third game here, is the Maple Leafs and the Canadiens. So like I said, Thomas Tatar is back in the lineup. So what I did was I projected that it was going to be Thomas Tatar, Josh Anderson, Phil Deneau on the top line. About 1 minute ago on Twitter, I found out that it is not going to be that. It is going to be, I think, Tatar, Deneau, and Caulfield. So Caulfield will stay on that top line. So these numbers for Montreal are all going to be fucked up, which is brutal. I hate the fact there's no morning skates sometimes, but I get it. They have a back-to-back, so I understand. But Tatar, Deneau, Caulfield on the top line, so Montreal 1's numbers are not going to be correct. I would imagine that means Josh Anderson probably plays on the second line, so it'll probably be Toffoli, Suzuki, Anderson. Then the third line will probably be Kotkaniemi with Lehkonen and Armia. So again, all these numbers are going to be wrong, unfortunately. Just got word of it 1 minute ago. I did update it for Tatar's return, but I guessed wrong. So that's unfortunate. But overall, it doesn't really affect things too much, I don't think. These numbers will probably all look slightly similar. I would imagine that Montreal 1's defensive numbers are a little bit better, and Montreal 1's offensive numbers are a little bit worse. On the flip side, I don't think Montreal 2's offensive numbers can get much better with Anderson. They'll probably be right around the same. And then Montreal 3's numbers should be much better, adding UL Armia. Overall, though, Toronto is a very good team. They're very good defensively this year as well. And I tweeted it out earlier this afternoon. The Canadiens are going through an absolute meat grinder of a schedule right now. And I know that obviously that this has kind of been the story of this season, but they're going through a particularly difficult stretch right now. This will be their 9th game in the last 14 days, which is just insane. That's a lot of hockey. Then you factor in the fact they've had it is a back-to-back again. Over that same 14-day stretch, this will be the Maple Leafs' 6th game over that same stretch. So the Maple Leafs should be a much fresher team. The Canadians just have not looked right, in the last few games. Regardless, like they look tired, which I wouldn't be surprised if they're absolutely spent. So to me, I have a hard time, even targeting the Canadians right now, regardless of what their lineup looks like, just because this isn't a good matchup. They don't look good right now, and they're probably exhausted. So I really like Toronto tonight. Toronto has got to be one of my favorites, because I think a lot of people, when they play Montreal, steer away a little bit to some degree. Matthews is always going to carry massive ownership, but Montreal's done a fairly good job. Obviously, they've done a terrific job against McDavid. They haven't done quite the same number on Matthews and Marner, but they've done an okay job. I mean, Deneau is still one of the best two-way centers in the game, so their ownership could be a little bit lower than, say, the Pittsburgh ones, the Edmonton ones tonight. And I think it's a decent spot because of, the back-to-back. Caden Primo might help elevate that ownership a little bit because he's terrible. But I really like Toronto one tonight, even though they are going to be going up against Phil Deneau. But, Phil Deneau, Caulfield, Tatar, it's a line that's never played together. They might not be as big of a force as they normally are either. The one thing I'll say about Montreal is, if we look at the matchups here, the second line, the Suzuki line is expected to see quite a bit of Pierre Engvall, Wayne Simmons, Jason Spezza. Overall, that fourth line of the Leafs, even though it's Jason Spezza, who's like 40, and Wayne Simmons, who's 35, those numbers aren't right, but they're close. They've done a pretty good job. But if it's Suzuki, Toffoli, and Anderson, I do have a little bit of interest in that line. They've done a lot of damage together. Suzuki's red hot right now, and they're just not very expensive. Toffoli's obviously pretty pricey, $6,100. Suzuki at just $4,300, and then now Anderson at just $4,700. If that's the line, which I'm not 100% sold that it will be, but I have a pretty good chance that it will be, I do have some interest there. So I might sprinkle them in some of my lineups because they're just a little bit too cheap. But overall, this doesn't look like a great setup. The schedule is not working in Montreal's favor. And McDavid or Matthews, oh my God, like that's such a difficult decision to pick between the two of them. Really put me in a tough spot here. I would say probably McDavid still by a hair, just because, as tough as things are going for Montreal right now, they're just as bad for Vancouver, and McDavid's an absolute freak. So I'd have to give a slight edge to McDavid still. But Matthews is obviously right there. Overall, so that's pretty much that. The second line for the Leafs going up against the third line, it's really hard for me to break this down because, again, these numbers aren't 100% correct. It's not the greatest matchup. Kotkaniemi's done a pretty good job. That Toronto second line's obviously been solid. So I would still play Toronto 2. I think sprinkling them in as well. I'll have more exposure to Toronto 1, but sprinkling in Toronto 2, just like Pittsburgh 2, I think is definitely a smart option tonight. Get pivot off the extreme chalk. Now, as we look at the power play reports here for these first 3 games, not a whole lot going for the Penguins. Their power play is pretty solid. The Sabres penalty kill is not very good. So overall, the power play versus penalty kill advantage is quite nice, but the Penguins don't draw a ton of penalties, and the Sabres are one of the most disciplined teams in the NHL. So the chances might not be, too many, but overall it's a pretty good advantage when they do get on the power play, especially getting Malkin back should help boost that unit up as well. The Hurricanes look solid on the power play as well. Their power play is pretty good. The Blackhawks penalty kill is solid, but overall, just looks like a half decent advantage. I don't think you ever really play the Hurricanes for their power play anyway. You're more or less just playing for their 5v5 dominance. The Maple Leafs look really good in the power play. Obviously, their power play is super good. The top power play on the entire slate, going up against the second worst penalty kill on the entire slate, and an entire penalty kill at that. So it looks like a really, just obviously a game that the Leafs should dominate. I just don't know. I just don't think Caden Primo is really gonna, stand in his way too much. Izzy Jim, both McDavid and Matthews. Yep, I think that's probably a decent option tonight. Top goalie on tonight's slate. We'll take a quick look at that. Right now, Jack Campbell grades out as the top goaltender on the entire slate. I think that's a pretty decent option, especially the fact that he's 7,900 in comparison to some of these other guys. Just a nice matchup. Montreal doesn't score a whole lot. They're exhausted. They're on a back-to-back. So I think Campbell is a really good option tonight. I really like Varlamov too. He's just played so well this year. Definitely should be getting some Vezina Trophy consideration. Really nice matchup with the Devils. Igor Shesterkin against Boston. He grades out nicely because look at how many shots he's expected to face. Second most shot volume on the entire slate, 31.2 shots. So the shot volume's there. The win equity is probably not there. But I mean, if you're looking for a cheaper goalie that's going to see a lot of rubber, Shesterkin is definitely one of the more upper echelon $7,000 goalies tonight. If we're looking, I think Jari is obviously fine against the Sabres. He's the most expensive goalie on the slate. I don't need talking to him. I do prefer Jari over Mrazek though. And then Koskinen and Swayman. I'd probably play Swayman over Koskinen. I can't get behind Koskinen. He's just too weird out there. Blackwood looks solid too. Obviously, he played very well against the Bruins the other night, but he's played well against the Bruins every game this year. The Islanders, not known to be an offensive powerhouse. They will get Matt Barzal back tonight. It looks like they're going to scratch Jordan Eberle though. So overall, their offense is not humming right now. So I think Blackwood at 7,200 is a really nice deep goalie punt. Probably my favorite goalie punt of the lot tonight. It would probably be him and Shesterkin more than anything. I don't know if I really want to go. I mean, these really cheap goalies have been paying off for us the last couple days. Yesterday, I mean, we got Forsberg right. We got, Blackwood right the other day. We got Hauser right the other day. There's another goalie yesterday that was super cheap that I played and he did really well. Something in my eye. But yeah, so those are the top goalies of the night. All right, so moving on to the fourth game of the night. We've got the Islanders and the New Jersey Devils. So as I mentioned, it looks like, Matt Barzal is definitely back in, but it looks like Eberle is going to be scratched. These were the lines they ran in practice or in the game day skate. I don't normally get lines from the Islanders in the game day skate, so I was pretty excited today. Barry Trotz finally did us a favor. So yeah, this is what I'd expect to see. It is Zajac and Palmieri's return to New Jersey. They get a pretty nice opportunity on the top line. That's kind of intriguing if you want to go down the narrative street. The second line continues to play very well. That third line just offers absolutely nothing with Ross Johnson on it. But so that's what their lineup is going to look like tonight in terms of the matchups. The Barzal line basically just going to avoid the Michael McLeod line the majority of the time. The Nelson line going to go head-to-head with Jack Hughes for the majority of the evening. And then that Peugeot line will see a lot of the Devils' fourth line. Really, the only thing we care about here is the top six for both teams. So let's take a look at Islanders 1 first. They're going to see 37% against Jack Hughes, which obviously, as we know, not a great matchup. Jack Hughes continues to play extremely well. Defensively, their numbers are terrific. 60% Corsi 4. You want to try to avoid them as much as possible. But going up against the second and what was it, the fourth line? Yeah, second and fourth line of the Devils is a nice matchup. So that looks pretty solid and a decent setup for Barzal. Obviously, he has not been great. I think he only has 7 points in his last 14 games or something like that. I wrote about it this morning. I can't remember the exact numbers, but that obviously helps his price. He's only 5,300, which is extremely cheap. Palmieri has not done much as an Islander. He's just 3,400. It's pretty much his first run, I think, with Barzal, though. So, maybe a little bit of extra juice here for Zajac and Palmieri returning to New Jersey. I don't have a whole lot of interest in Zajac. He just never really offers a whole lot. But, I mean, if you want to punt him at 2,800, it is what it is. I do have a little bit more interest in a Barzal Palmieri mini stack. That seems like a half decent option. I want to play New York 2 as good as they've been. Problem for me, hard match against Jack Hughes tonight. Does not look like a great matchup. Obviously, Jack Hughes' numbers are really good. I think they're a little bit inflated. If as I've said before, they do stay. Earlier in the year they were seeing a lot of fourth lines as they were giving them more sheltered minutes. He's played a little bit of stiffer competition lately, and the numbers are still holding up. So I think they might be a little inflated, but overall, he's still done a really nice job. So I think that it's probably a night where I'm going to fade New York 2, especially just because of how popular, I was bang on the other night. They were massively popular. They did a nice job. They were in a lot of the top, 1% lineups. But overall, I think they'll probably be pretty popular again tonight because there's not a whole lot of good value options and not a lot of people are going to want to cram in these top lines. So I think they're going to be very popular again because they're super cheap. So it might be a time to fade them tonight and maybe shift over to New York 1 with Palmieri and Barzal, get off the cheap chalk a little bit, and then hope that Jack Hughes can control that matchup the majority of the night. Because normally New York 2 is really not that high upside of a line anyway. So, chasing them when they're 25% owned is a little bit, sketchier in a tough matchup. So I don't love them tonight just because I expect their ownership to still be pretty high and it's not a great matchup. I'm chasing 35 saves again with Hauser. He even backdoored W. I'm thinking of playing him too. I thought of playing Carr goalie. He might face 35 shots too. Yeah. So Hauser did that against the Islanders, right? So as I mentioned, the Islanders aren't that good. The Islanders, like offensively, the Islanders aren't that good. They're not that good on the road either. So yeah, like I think Hauser's going to face a ton of rubber tonight, but it's a little different when you go from facing an Islanders team without Matt Barzal to facing a fully loaded Penguins team on the road. I don't see it tonight. I hope a lot of people do play him because I think he's probably in for a little bit of a rude awakening. Could he see a ton of shot volume? Absolutely. He probably sees 45 shots tonight. The problem is if he gives up 5 and only stops 40, I mean, it's not a terrible night, but it's just not great. I think you have a little bit of a better chance playing Blackwood or one of the other mid-price goalies. But yeah, if you want to chase it, I think that's fine. And he's a great story. I just think he's gonna have a much tougher time against the Penguins tonight. I mean, and Vegas agrees. The implied total at 4 is just crazy. So yeah, I'm gonna have a tough time going there tonight. But more power to you. In terms of the power play tonight, both teams do not look very good. The Devils' power play is atrocious. The Islanders have a pretty good kill, not that surprising. The Islanders don't look that great on the power play. Their power play is very average. Even though the Devils' penalty kill sucks, the Islanders draw like no penalties whatsoever. The Devils are very disciplined, so should be a very, two of the more disciplined teams in the NHL going head-to-head tonight. Might not be a whole lot of penalty minutes in this one. The Bruins and the Rangers. So this game is very bizarre. Because who knows what's going to happen with the Rangers lineups? I'm just as confused about the Rangers lineups as I am with the Blackhawks lineups because, you've got these injuries in New York. And then now Pavel Buchnevich is suspended for 1 game. So this is kind of what they went to yesterday. It's like kind of what they went to, kind of like me guessing, to the best of my abilities. Strome and Zibanejad did see plenty of ice time together. Could Strome move back to center 100%? I have no idea. So it's very difficult to really read into what's going to happen in this game because we don't know a whole lot about their lineups, at least the way we do business. The one thing, though, I can say is that, it's similar to Chicago. Even if we don't 100% know what their line combinations are going to be, we might not get exact numbers, but we kind of know who is normally got good offensive numbers and who's normally got bad defensive numbers. And in New York, it's typically all bad. They are not a very good 5v5 team. And then now that they're shorthanded and missing some, no Panner, no Buchnevich, no Kreider, it's just there's no way that they've gotten better offensively at 5v5 without these guys. So overall, I think this is a really nice matchup for the Bruins, especially considering the Rangers coming off a very just intense game last night. I mean, everybody on the team basically got in a fight. There's a whole lot going on, right? I mean, the front office was just like, oh, there's just too much going on in New York. I mean, last night was hilarious. All those fights, if you're a hockey purist, you loved it. If you don't like fighting, then you hated it. And you went off on Twitter all day, which is whatever. I don't care. You're whatever. So yeah, this spells disaster to me for the Rangers. There's just too much surrounding this organization right now. And then yesterday there was just such a buildup, and then today just seems like a game where they go into Boston and get beat like 7-0. I don't know if you guys agree. That's kind of my sentiment. So yeah, Boston 2, Boston 1, both obviously look outstanding. It's really hard to play the Rangers because we don't really know who's going to be playing together. But yeah, so Bergeron's basically going to see the top 6 of the Rangers the majority of the night. The second line, the Hall line, is going to see a little bit more of the Rangers' third line as opposed to the second line. So nice and easy for us to break down from the top 6. These numbers are obviously ridiculous from Boston's top 2 lines. The one issue I have with Boston 1 this year, as opposed to what they've done in the past, this Bergeron line is not getting the same amount of usage as they normally did. They used to be one of these lines that would go out there and play 16, 17, 18 minutes a night. And they're just not. They've really been rolling 4 lines a lot more. I don't know if it's kind of just in response to the condensed schedule that they're kind of trying to preserve that top line a little bit more, make sure that they're fresh every night, make sure that they're obviously good to go for the playoffs. They just aren't playing as much as they used to. Like if you look here, obviously like Edmonton won 30%. Edmonton 29%, the bottom 6, almost nothing. It's a little bit different here when you got Boston 28, 27%. That's not normally what you see out of Boston. So their upside does become a little bit more limited when they're only playing 14 minutes a night. Like oftentimes, Sean Corrali plays more minutes than Bergeron at even strength. So it is a little bit of a concern, but this matchup looks too good. This top six of the Rangers, again, I don't know exactly how these numbers are going to shake out, but overall, they're not going to be very good. So it's a nice matchup regardless of how the lineup shakes out for New York. So Boston 1 looks like they should absolutely crush the top 6 of the Rangers. And then Boston 2 should do a nice job against that top line. And then also whoever's on that third line. That third line looks okay right now, but it could completely change by game time. So, yeah, I like both lines a lot tonight. Boston 1's going to be massively popular. Pastrnak, I would imagine Pastrnak, maybe not. No, Pastrnak will probably be the third highest owned player on the slate. It'll probably be McDavid, Matthews, Pastrnak, Leon. That would be my guess. But it's a great spot. Nielsen from Islanders, not bad value if you want 3 centers in your lineup. Yeah, I just don't love the matchup. I loved it. If you don't like that, don't watch hockey. Yeah, I mean, it's hockey, right? Like they fight. I get it's like nobody wants to see like 30 fights. Maybe like it's a little bit ridiculous, but I mean, you only get those games once or twice a year, and when it happens, it's hilarious. Like I'm down for it. They're hockey players. They don't care. Like if you ask them, they'd be like, "Yeah, it was fun as hell. Nobody got hurt. It's good to go." So yeah, Boston 3.4 goals implied total tonight. The Rangers at 2.2. So yeah, just looks like another night where they should just crush. On the power play, Boston doesn't look great overall. Their power play has not been all that good. The Rangers penalty kill is pretty solid, but again, they should do enough damage at 5v5 that even at the power play, anything on the power play is gravy. Obviously, you get a little bit more power play production out of Boston 1. They fully correlate in the top power play unit with Matt Grzelcyk. So yeah, Boston 1 definitely, the top option. But Boston 2 looks extremely good as well. So from the New York side, it's just hard because you don't know what their lineup's going to look like at all. 6th game of the night, Edmonton implied total of 3.8 goals. Vancouver at 2.4. So another game where Edmonton 1 should go crazy. They grade out as obviously the top option in this game. Vancouver 1 continues to look pretty good and continues to pop on this sheet though. So I have a little bit of interest in them there. I think Edmonton 2 is kind of interesting as well. From a matchup standpoint, Edmonton 1 is going to shift things up a little bit. They're going to avoid JT Miller a little bit more on home ice and see a little bit more of the third line, which is great. And then the second line, the Nugent Hopkins line, is going to see a little bit more of JT Miller and avoid Bo Horvat. And then the third line is going to basically go head-to-head with the bottom 6 of the Vancouver Canucks. So, avoiding JT Miller's line it isn't the worst thing, but the third line is much worse, obviously. I think it's Travis Boyd. So, yeah, they have a 42% Corsi for. McDavid should absolutely just railroad those guys. He'll have plenty of success against Bo Horvat, as he normally does. So that's obviously a ridiculous matchup. I don't need to talk you into them. If you want to go to the second line of the Oilers, I think it's fine. I don't know if I'd be full stacking them, but including Nugent Hopkins or one-offing Nugent Hopkins in lineups where you're not playing Edmonton 1, I think is smart to kind of at least get some Edmonton exposure, get some exposure to that power play unit. Maybe you play Nugent Barry with the other top lines as opposed to playing in lines where you're fading McDavid and Draisaitl, because it just looks like another matchup where they're just going to kind of go off. Leon obviously continues to just be a little bit too cheap. 7,700 is far too cheap for Leon. Obviously, we saw kind of what he was able to do at his discounted price the other night, which went bonkers. 2 goals and 4 shots, 23 DraftKings points at 7,600. So too cheap for him. He's had 2 goals, 2 assists in these 2-game set against the Canucks. McDavid obviously continues to just roll along at a ridiculous pace in these 2 games against the Canucks. He's got 2 goals, 4 assists, just a mediocre 46 DraftKings points in 2 games. So no reason to fade them tonight. But obviously, if you're building multiple lineups, you can get away from them in some. And then, like I said, including Nuge a little bit, I think makes some sense. But I do like Vancouver 1 a little bit as well. They are going to see a little bit of McDavid, see a little bit of the fourth line of the Oilers, and then a lot of that Nugent Hopkins line. Overall, that Nugent Hopkins line is not great defensively. The McDavid line is not great defensively either. In this series, we've seen the Canucks get their chances against that McDavid line. The McDavid line just plays a very up-tempo game. As soon as they get the puck, they're back in the offensive zone, but they give up chances as well. So it's not the worst matchup in the world. So, yeah, I do like Vancouver 1 a little bit tonight. The matchups are pretty solid across the board for them. It's not, the greatest matchup ever, but their numbers are solid. 31 scoring chances, 4 per 60 is really, really nice. 51% Corsi for is fine and best on the Canucks. So I do have some interest. They've been playing pretty well. Niels Hoglander got bumped off of the top power play unit, which is kind of unfortunate, but JT Miller is still far too cheap at 4,900. Brock Besser at 5,900, a nice price as well. So they're a nice value stack at 14,400. The fact that Mikko Koskinen gets to start instead of Mike Smith is an added bonus as well. So if you take a look at the implied totals, they do have the highest implied total, of the 6 underdogs tonight. So that's, I mentioned I'm probably not going to play too much Buffalo, probably not going to play a lot of Chicago. Montreal too has a little bit of interest. Not that interested in the Devils. The Rangers, it's too hard to predict. So realistically, Vancouver's the only team I can turn to that's an underdog tonight and really expect to get anything from a stacking perspective. Obviously, all these teams you can play one off a defenseman or whatever. But overall, from like actually playing, including some lines in a lineup, Vancouver one looks like the one that you could maybe turn to from a underdog perspective, and then obviously Montreal 2 looks okay, depending on how that line shakes out. But yeah, we have 8 comments here that I haven't read, so that's great. Oh, you guys are just talking, so that's good. So yeah, that's that for those games. If we want to take a look at the big board now, overall, Pittsburgh won, grades out as the best play on the entire slate. Not really all that surprising, but Edmonton won closely behind them. Vancouver won, though. That's, as you can see there, that's a nice advantage for them. And I don't think they're going to carry a lot of ownership tonight, so I do like them a lot. Toronto won, obviously great. Boston won. I mean, it's the prime suspect. It's exactly who you'd expect to be at the top of this chart. It's literally 6 of the most dominant lines in the entire NHL going up against 6 of the weaker clubs in the league. So I shouldn't say that about the Montreal Canadiens because they're not one of the weaker clubs in the league, but they're just not playing good hockey right now. But the other clubs just not that great. So yeah, pretty obvious. I mean, it's not a whole lot. It's just going to be it's still going to be how you break it down and how you build. Just got to get different because everyone's going to be playing these same 6 lines for the most part. I'm still mad at Colorado 1. Yeah, me too. They screwed me big time last night. I played a lot of Colorado 1 just because there were so many value lines that I like last night. I'm like, I'm going to cram all of them in different lineups with Colorado 1. And then when Colorado 1 goes off, hopefully these value lines do too, and I'll have a huge night. And then all the value lines did, and then Colorado 1 did nothing. I was like, oh, are you kidding me? Terrible. So who are the best mid-price punts tonight? I think Joe Thornton's got to top that list. He's played pretty well in that role before. He's had a pretty good season, all things considered. He's still Joe Thornton. So I think he's probably the only one that really looks okay at mid-price, right around mid-price. If Phil Kurashev is in that top 6 for the Blackhawks, he could be okay at mid-price. And then obviously here, we'll go to the D. So I did include the D tool here today. It's nothing fancy. It's just kind of it's a good tool to find those really cheap guys and who's going to kind of block a lot of shots, who's going to take a couple shots and just give us a little bit. And then if they can chip in an assist, we might be okay. So Brandon Carlo continues to play extremely well. Obviously, it's only his 2nd game back, but he's always been a reliable guy. He's normally a little bit more expensive because he missed time. He's mid-priced. He had 3 shots and 1 block in 20 minutes of ice time in his 1st game back. Similar type of production probably can be expected tonight. Riley Stillman, you he just plays a ton of minutes in Chicago for whatever reason. He's seeing, 18 to 20 minutes a night. He had much more usage than he saw when he was with the Panthers. He's not going to probably get involved in the offense. He has no points in 18 games, but he blocks a ton of shots. So that's pretty much all you can expect out of him. Brady Shea, I don't know if Brady Shea is 100% healthy, but at 3,000, he plays enough minutes to get the job done on a team that's going to score a lot of goals. Obviously there's other guys on that team that I'd much prefer to play. Ben Sherratt, obviously a guy that we talk about a lot. Joel Edmondson as well. Scott Mayfield. A lot of these guys just block a ton of shots. Somebody just mentioned Sandin in the chat. Yeah, Sandin's absolutely outstanding. He won't pop up on this list because he isn't that type of floor guy that you're going to play. But what you get out of him is the potential for a goal or a couple of assists. He's like he's the Eric Brandstrom of tonight. He's on the top power play unit with Toronto. He helps also just bring down that. He gets you that salary relief while playing Toronto that you need. And so he's tonight's Eric Brandstrom, right? He's on PP1 with them. He's had some success there in the past. He's got 3 assists in 8 games. So he's not going to be the same floor guy as what these guys offer, but he's the upside guy. So, chances are you could end up with 0 points from Sandin, but you could end up with 0 points from these guys too. And Sandin is the type of guy that could get you to 15, 20 points if he has a big night. So Sandin is definitely, terrific. Noah Dobson, definitely somebody. He's another guy that's similar to Sandin, top power play unit. He's been pretty solid. He's a little bit more of a floor guy, right? He shoots a little bit more. He pops up on this list at 2,800. So, he's another guy. He'll shoot a little bit more, block a couple shots. He's definitely pretty strong as well. Keandre Miller still is going to play a ton of minutes up with Adam Fox. I like Keandre Miller at 2,600. He should see some power play 2 usage tonight with Buchnevich out. He could see a little bit more usage on the power play on that second unit, but it's still a little bit of usage nonetheless. He had 2 shots and 4 blocks last night in 23.5 minutes. So the additional usage should be really good for him. Let's go back to the goalies now for a second, just to, if anybody missed it. Every goalie is risky, to be honest. Chiasson, yeah, Alex Chiasson is another good punt. I continue to include him in my Pittsburgh or my Edmonton stacks. You just have to, right? You have to get salary relief somewhere. So Sandin with Toronto is almost a no-brainer tonight. Chiasson with Leon and McDavid's almost a no-brainer tonight. Dobson, I think, if you're playing, you can get a lot out of playing Palmieri, Dobson, and Barzal, and they're not expensive. And you can pair them with a lot of really talented pieces. I mean, if you play them and then you also include Sandin in that mix, maybe even Chiasson, you could really get up and get some of those upper echelon guys and still play a half decent goalie. So that's an interesting way to go about it. There is some good options on the back end tonight. There's some cheap goalies that you can go to, but I think, most of my lineups are definitely going to include Jack Campbell and Semyon Varlamov tonight. They just look too good at that price. But if you need to get cheap, I think Blackwood is fine. He's probably the one that I can really kind of bank on to have a solid night, at the bottom there. Was Barzal actually a healthy scratch last game? Yeah, I think so. I think just what they're doing is resting guys, right? They're in it. They're just kind of trying to get some guys some rest, get some new bodies in the lineup, but also send a little bit of a message, right? Like, he hasn't been great. So I think it's a little bit of both. They're trying to just give them a night off, get some fresh bodies in the lineup, but also, hey, pick it up. Play. You have 7 points in the last 14 games. So I think that he should probably have a big game. The fact that he's with the 2 Devils in their return to New Jersey, I think should add a little bit extra juice as well. So I do have quite a bit of interest in them, and I don't think that they'll be all that popular. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's DFO DFS show for Thursday, May the 6th. Good luck to everybody this evening. Hopefully you return tomorrow with more money in your bankroll than you had tonight. I'm not 100% sure if I will be doing a DFS show tomorrow. I don't think the slate's too big, so as long as the slate isn't massive, I think it's only like 7 games, I could probably pull it off. But keep an eye out on Twitter. I'll let you know for sure, kind of middle of the afternoon. If I get things done, I might go live at like 3-ish, so you might have to catch it later if you're not available at that time, but I'll keep you posted on Twitter. Thank you so much. Please smash that like button on your way out. Chiasson, Thornton, or Wahlstrom? Probably not Wahlstrom. One of the other two. I think Thornton's probably a little bit of a safer play. Obviously, he's going to play. He's just going to play a lot more. He's got a lot more potential to chip in a couple assists. So probably Thornton. But Chiasson's fine as well. I just think you're not going to get any shot volume out of Thornton, but playing with Matthews and Marner, he's probably going to pick up an assist at the very least, where you can get a bag out of Chiasson. So I'd go Thornton. But yeah, see you guys here tomorrow. Maybe. If not, see you Monday.